Welcome into the Fantasy Guides podcast. My name is Andrew Teuscher, and I am joined today by the owner, the operator of Fantasy Guides and fantasyguides.com, Stephen Rippey, and the master of the bets, fellow Fantasy Guides contributor, Jacob Rhodes, are here today to talk about buys and sells. But actually, this week I misspoke. It's not sells. We got a secret for you, something special for you as we end off this year. We're getting redraft buys per usual, but instead of sells, we're staying positive. We're getting some dynasty buys in there because, gentlemen, we're entering week 12. You've got to start thinking ahead to the offseason at this point. We were just rambling on about some of the offseason scripts we're excited for, and man, that's dynasty. That's where Dynasty Feasts is in the offseason. So we got redraft buys, we got dynasty buys. Steven, Jacob, you ready to roll?
Definitely, man. I've only gotten like a couple of trade offers out in our Dynasty League so far today because I've been so busy.
Steven he's not been working on anything else except for trades in our Dynasty League.
Deadline's coming, man.
If you've seen a lack of posts on Instagram, it's because Steven's been sending 20 trade offers a day.
Hey, you know what? I was sleeping on that league for about a year and a half, and then I went, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm the head of Fantasy Guides. I need to win this league, so I've been taking it a little bit more serious.
Per usual, no one cares about your Dynasty League. They care about their team, so let's talk about some redraft buys. And just FYI, Steven's going to scattershot a whole bunch of guys, but me and Jacob have a couple of wide receivers we specifically want to highlight. And which one are you wanting to highlight, Jacob?
I want to highlight the elite talent from this past year's draft that is on a team that looks really good this year, has a quarterback playing really good despite the release of Call of Duty. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. He looks really good. So coming off a bye week, second half of rookie season, wide receiver bump. We always see those bump for those rookie wide receivers right after that bye. So hopefully it happens for him. He's got a good schedule rest of the season. It's top 5. It's a middle of the road for the fantasy playoffs, but if you just look at it with the eye test, it's actually better than that. The only non-green matchup, if you're looking on Sleeper, is Carolina. And I'm not worried about Carolina for Marv. He'll be fine. But entering the bye week, he had a rough 3-week stretch of matchups. It was all red, but he still had a wide receiver 4 output and a wide receiver 14 output. So coming into that bye week, he was even playing better. And if you look at that game log on Sleeper, he's only had 3 good matchups all year. And in those matchups, he was wide receiver 1, wide receiver 20, wide receiver 26. That's 15.5 plus points in all 3. So Kyler's just playing at an elite level. The schedule's getting really good going rest of the season. I think it's Marvin's time to shine here and show us why he was that top wide receiver prospect in this past draft.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He's an elite, like you said. We still think he's an elite prospect. And look at these games. Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle. I mean, depends on with New England.
And
the
we just
Rams,
saw what Puka
those
and
all
Cup
feel
did
like
there.
those could have shootout potential too, where it's just back and forth, back and forth. Carolina, I had so many people worried about Jared Goff last week because they're like, what if the Lions get this big lead against the Jaguars? I'm like, that means they scored a lot of points. So I don't worry about games like Carolina where, they might be just killing the team and then they don't have to pass as much in the second half. So what? That means they probably did really good in the first half. So yeah, I think that's one of those tougher matchups, if you will, with air quotes that I'm not worried about. Yeah, I like that one.
And weirdly enough, the Arizona Cardinals are competitive. They might win the NFC West. So they have to keep trotting everything out there and trying their very best. Everyone's going to remain locked in. That's something I'm a little scared with the buy I'm going to mention. I think it'll still be fine, but it's something you have to keep in mind going into the fantasy playoffs is some dudes are checking out. Some dudes are thinking Cancun. They booked their vacation. They're excited to get there. Marv, he's too young to book his own vacations. He can't rent a car. He's locked in to the Arizona season.
His dad's not even booking it. His dad's getting a booker to book it, a travel agent.
His dad's too old to know that you can go online and Travelocity.
He's never booked his own trip.
That's true. Shout out Travelocity, not a sponsor. Please sponsor. I got another buy. This one's a lot cheaper, and I Steven, you inspired me for this one. Let's get somebody you could.
This isn't an elite prospect?
It's not.
Wow. That's how hard was this for you?
It broke my heart to have to say it, but I think you can buy Jakobie Meyers and be very excited about some slightly above average fantasy football from him, especially in the fantasy playoffs. And I say that in jest partially because you're not getting a wide receiver one. Don't even go there. But this dude is seriously underrated. He always is. And he's got a quarterback who's going to throw the ball a whole bunch. Jakobie Meyers is the wide receiver 37, but his average 14.8 points per game and a 24% target share since Davante Adams left. And I think there was some people not catching up to how good he's been without Davante, because when Davante left, Myers also suffered an injury. So there's a gap between when that happened. There wasn't that immediate reaction. So Myers has been that good since Davante left. It's clearly Brock Bowers' team, but Jakobie Meyers is feasting off of people focusing on Bowers. Also, he has the second easiest remaining schedule, and it's teams that they can beat. So it's going to be competitive games. They're not going to start benching guys. So the Cancun thing, I'm less worried about. They're going to be playing for Antonio Pierce's job down the stretch. They play Atlanta, Jacksonville, New Orleans. Teams that you can pass against, teams that they could play with. I don't think they'll win any of those. Maybe they could beat Jacksonville, New Orleans, sure. So this is a defenses that are bad at stopping the pass, teams that they could beat. He was the wide receiver 24 last year and the wide receiver 28 the year before that. So if he just regresses to what he's always been, on top of a good stretch, he could win you a fantasy championship, plugging him into your flex. He could plug a hole that you need to get your boat sailing to the fantasy playoffs.
I love that one. Actually, when you guys were texting and I was scrambling to get my picks in for this podcast, I thought for surely Andrew had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jacob had Jakobie Meyers as their redraft buys. But no, Myers, I couldn't agree more. I think I had him, or we had him as a buy last week. I think we've mentioned him a couple of weeks.
On our post, but not on a video.
Oh, okay. The Dolphins, they were a tough matchup, and he didn't really come through. 8.8 fantasy points. This week, he's got Denver. So I think anyone looking at the schedule, they're like, oh, God, Denver next week. And even Kansas City after that's not quite isn't an easy matchup by any means. But like you said, after that, Tampa, Atlanta, Jacksonville, New Orleans, this guy could win you your championship in the playoffs. The Atlanta, Jacksonville, and New Orleans, it doesn't get much better than that. So, and people just don't like Jakobie Meyers. We're fantasy analysts, and Jacob, you and I were negotiating on some trade, or just talking about some trade earlier this offseason, and you brought up Myers. And even I, who look at this stuff and try to find the diamond in the rough, was kind of like, it's Myers,
Yeah.
you know? So in your more casual leagues, I think that people just look at this guy like a jag. They look at him like Nick Westbrook-Akine. I think he's better than that. Yeah, I love this one.
Yeah, he's great. And there's plenty of offense to go around with this team that needs to throw the ball because they can't run it. So Brock's going to get his work for sure, but there's plenty left over for Jakobie to eat as well. That schedule does look great, and I think you can sell people on the fact that, like, Denver's going to be kind of rough next week. KC doesn't look good on paper, but he actually did good against them earlier this year. So,
especially if it's a team that needs to win next week. That's like the team you got to target.
Yeah.
Jakobie, we see you. We know you're out there balling. Keep doing it, young man. Youngish, 28, gets by. Hey, Steven, you've got some buys for us. We've got a lot of guys we've mentioned before, so we don't want to just give them their own slot again and waste your guys' time. Yeah. Trade deadlines are coming up, so I'm not even sure how many more of these we can do. So, Steven, just let them rip. We'll react. What you got for some buys?
All right, so these are just for the playoffs, mostly what I looked at. Teams looking to make the playoffs are looking to buy these players. And these two quarterbacks, I just had awful games. They're old, not exciting, but Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins, if we're just looking at the schedule, they have according to Pro Football Focus, the second and third easiest playoff schedules. Kirk Cousins just scored, 4 fantasy points? But we know that earlier in the season, he had a game where he had 5 touchdown passes and 500 passing yards. So I just think it's one of those things. These guys are super cheap. I think they could be useful for a team that needs quarterback help in the playoffs. Love those two guys.
Old guys, but they're still sticking around. They're getting better with age. Yeah, it looks bad on sleeper lists. Some of these guys is like an orange-red matchup, not something great, but it's because teams haven't had to score on them a whole bunch. I think the Falcons and the Jets, they can't not score as much as they can with the way their defenses are playing.
Like one of the Kirk Cousins, for example, week 16 against the Giants at home. That doesn't worry me.
No.
I don't see the Giants like shutting down the Atlanta passing attack in Atlanta. So those are two guys. And then Aaron Rodgers, I think there's just so much resentment towards that guy, the organization.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so, for sure.
There is for a lot of reasons, but it's funny. People talking about Garrett, like they'll say there's no one on the Jets worth rostering. I've seen these comments. These are actual comments. Now your league's probably not that. You're probably smarter than that. Those that are listening, but I don't think people realize like Garrett Wilson's the wide receiver 3 on the year. That Breece Hall is a top 10 running back. Like the sentiment is that they're much worse than that. And so I think that also goes to Aaron Rodgers, and these guys can be values, especially in the playoffs, because the Jets just have such an easy playoff schedule.
I did not have Garrett Wilson top 5 on my bingo card. Holy moly, he's been good this year. All right, Steven.
That's the thing. I think people just forget.
Absolutely. Get to these running backs.
Okay. Running backs, just a reminder, Chuba Hubbard, easiest playoff schedule moving forward. J.K. Dobbins didn't have a great game until the last 30 seconds of the game last week still. What did he end up with? 18 fantasy points. So he was putting up a dud. Amazing playoff schedule. So I like Chuba. I like J.K. Dobbins. And then James Conner, the Cardinals. You just talked about their schedule for receivers. I think for the whole offense, it's much better. I think James Conner could be awesome for the playoffs. So those are 3 running backs that I like for the playoffs.
On that note, with those guys, they all have very clear handcuff options. Yeah. Make sure you're getting them as well.
Yeah, this is handcuff season. So you definitely want to... You should be dropping players that probably aren't making your lineup to get these handcuffs. And the wide receivers, we've mentioned him a bunch of times, but Calvin Ridley had a dud game, but should have had a much bigger game. Popped up on missing points, Jacob. How many did he?
51-yard touchdown called back.
Yeah. By an illegal shift.
Yeah,
of all things,
freaking illegal shifts, man.
Get rid of them. Let us do anything.
Yes. So Ridley, I think there's a buying window right now. One of the easiest remaining schedules and playoff schedule. I'm going to still beat the drum of the Chicago wide receivers. We saw a little bit of life for these receivers last week, but I think there's still a buy low window because they didn't do that much.
Especially because the Chicago Bears just NFL strength of schedule is very high. They're going to be down constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And for fantasy purposes, it's a top 5 schedule for the fantasy playoffs. So I still think I'm still taking a chance on these wide receivers. Same with the Giants wide receivers. We got to change at quarterback. Probably not a great thing, but schedule. I think the wide receivers have the easiest schedule moving forward, and in the playoffs, it's amazing. So Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson. I think those 2 guys you could target. Even Theo Johnson at tight end. Obviously, just depends on your depth at positions, but I think those guys are still worth targeting. Same with the Packers wide receivers. Chicago's secondary is tough, so they did not perform this past week. I think it gets much easier moving forward. I like the Packers wide receivers moving forward. You already brought up Jakobie Meyers. I had him on the list. And then the Chiefs wide receivers. The Chiefs receiving schedule for the playoffs is actually pretty good, so I think you could target DeAndre Hopkins right now in a trade, especially with the way they just performed.
Really bringing out the Packers wide receivers. We're seeing lots of shifts in usage. One guy who's been dud after dud these last couple of weeks was Jaden Reed, where he was explosive and incredible at the beginning of this year. It's because he only plays in 11 personnel. Well, they just went through a stretch where they kept beating teams or being in game scripts where they just want to run the ball a whole bunch. Well, the teams are about to play San Francisco, Miami, Detroit, Seattle, New Orleans, they can beat the crap out of. But then Minnesota, those are all playoff teams outside of New Orleans. You're not going to just get to run the ball every time with those teams. They will have to throw, have to get their good players to the ball.
Well, and it depends on which New Orleans team you get.
That's true. Like Taysom Hill?
Yeah, you get New Orleans on a good week, they can beat anybody.
Play Taysom Hill every snap, quarterback every single time. Bench Derek Carr, just let Taysom Hill play. Dang it.
Not too much quarterback, though. We don't want his position getting changed on the sleeper apps. Yeah.
Yeah, because if he's a quarterback, we're out.
It's funny seeing all these lineups sent to me where they like blew out somebody, and it's Taysom Hill in every one of them. And it depends on, I don't know if it's their league settings, but sometimes I see him as a flex, sometimes as a tight end, sometimes as a quarterback, so it's been fun.
Alrighty. Those are our redraft buys. But stick around because we got Dynasty buys for you. If you don't play Dynasty and you're watching this video, Get you in a dynasty league.
Yeah,
It keeps you
definitely.
going year round. You need to commit to it. And Jacob wants to commit to one young man. He's ready to settle down with this guy and have a great time for a few years. Who are you buying in dynasty, Jacob?
For a few years. This is like a 10-year buy. This is Odunze, just top 10 pick this past year. Steve just mentioned his redraft strength of schedule being fantastic. That bodes well for the second half of his rookie season. It's the number one playoff schedule coming into last week. He's got a top 3 strength of schedule rest of the season. Minnesota, Detroit, San Fran, Minnesota, Detroit, Seattle, Green Bay is just, that's fun for a wide receiver that is starting to see just increased usage.
Yeah, somebody who he's compared to a lot during the draft process and the start of the season was SN. And so the one tough matchup I see on that schedule is San Francisco, and we just saw JSN tear up San Francisco. So even that
DK
one
had 72. So
even that matchup, I could see him doing well in. And this could be for Dynasty. I mean, last week would have been a better buy after his 5-point performance, but he still only got 12 this week. So this could be the last chance at buying low on Rome Odunze, because I can see him having a big week versus Minnesota.
It's going to expire soon. He had 10 targets his first week with a new offensive coordinator. The schedule is just cake rest of the season. Keenan looks like a shell of himself and is gone after this year. And speaking of guys that want to go to Cancun, that's DJ Moore. DJ Moore is just...
He needs it.
He seems bad for the locker room. He just does not seem like a guy
weird. He doesn't seem like that guy.
I don't get it. And then he's getting paid a ton of money next year. And for a long time after that, he's got a small contract this year, the way they worked it out, but it's a $20+ million cap hit next year. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but I think we can see a changing of the guard for the number one receiver on that team as soon as next week. So, I'm excited for Rome. Incredible talent coming out of college. And I believe in Caleb too. I think it's mostly just a Bears problem. They could see a head coaching change next year. They already saw a coordinator change. So there's brighter days ahead for that offense as a whole. And I'm all in.
I mean, Caleb is fighting the Bears have never had a quarterback. He's fighting against all odds to be a good quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Yeah. So I still believe in him. And I agree. I think that those two paired up for a career potentially is something I want a part of.
The number one name being tossed out there is the guy that potentially almost went there last year had they fired their head coach.
Ooh, I know
Ben Johnson.
Yes.
He was supposed to be the dude. Rumors are that that's where he wants to land. And a big thing will be a paycheck. Oh, the Chicago Bears will hand out a fat paycheck if they can land Ben Johnson with Matt Eberflus out. If that happens, it is wheels up for every Chicago Bear.
Yeah. Two quick nerd stats before we move on from Rome. 7th in unrealized air yards, top 12 in ADOT. Those are fun, potential numbers that could be coming in for him sooner rather than later. So, volumes there.
Yeah, we just need Ben Johnson if he goes there, Andrew. I want him to stay on as just the OC, though. Get paid like a head coach, but then hire somebody else to do all the head coaching stuff, and you just be the OC.
I'm old enough to remember when Sean McVay first got hired. That's what he did. He brought in Wade Phillips, the old 7-year-old Wade Phillips. And I'm pretty sure that's how it went. He basically said, he's here to help me coach, be the head coach. And Sean just ran the offense. And they had immediate success. I don't understand why more people don't do that. I kind of get it. It's a power thing. But Rome Odunze, Chicago, it should be looking up. He's a great talent. I'm squashing the JSN comparisons. He was compared to JSN because it's like the third receiver for the Seahawks was JSN. The third receiver for the Bears is supposed to be Rome. They don't play the same. The high ADOT, the unrealized air yards, this is a fantasy-friendly Rome Odunze, not so fantasy-friendly JSN, although turning up lately. Here is another fantasy-friendly wide receiver that Steven would like to buy this week. Who you got, Steven?
Yeah, so Tank Dell, I think people were kind of excited about him because he had that good game against the Jets. Sorry, I'm trying to pull him up. I should have had it pulled up prior to. He had the good game against the Jets. And then in back-to-back weeks, he's been under 10 fantasy points. He's been in the single digits. So I think that opens up for Dynasty a little bit of a buying window. I think the casual, it's hard to say. A lot of Dynasty players are hardcore like we are, and then you got a lot of Dynasty players that are a little more casual. They don't look that deep into it. They might just see, he's been good because Stephon Diggs is still on the team. Well, Diggs turns 31 next month. just suffered a season-ending ACL injury.
He's a free agent at the end of the year.
Yep, and a free
That's
agent.
what I was going to say. Is
Yeah.
the Texans, they were savvy when they negotiated the contract. They voided the final 4 years of his original contract, which was a ridiculous contract with the Bills, which allows them to release him this offseason without any cap hits. So
he's going to land on the Chiefs. Just mentioning, there's no way he doesn't go to the Chiefs. I just thought this through. That's terrible. Continue.
It's probably the case, but Diggs won't be there. So what we've been seeing since Diggs got injured, Andrew, you had brought this up in your post we did today, just the consolidation of the passing targets to Tank Dell and Nico Collins. I think we continue to see that. Prior to the Diggs injury, Tank Dell, like we've said, just wasn't himself. He was sitting at a 16% target share on the year, which was way below what he was as a rookie. Since then, we haven't seen a game under 22% target share. He had a 31% target share in the game without Nico and Diggs. And now he's sitting at 20% on the season. I think we see that moving forward. I think he's also looked more explosive the last couple of weeks when I watch him. He looks like the old Tank Dell. I think he would have had a better game against Dallas last night if that game was at all competitive. I think we start to see more competitive games, more fantasy-friendly games. I think there's a really kind of a last chance ditch effort. And now he does have a tougher matchup this week against Tennessee, but it's not enough of one to scare me off. They are playing at home. And then he's got Jacksonville. He's got Baltimore still on the schedule. I think he's going to have a decent second half of the season. Another thing I like about him, one being tied to CJ Stroud, but also I just like these receivers that play in domes. Like you see Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's so friendly, fantasy friendly to play in a dome. He plays not only home games in the dome, they play the Colts twice a year. They always travel to Indy. They play Jacksonville, good weather there. Nashville, it's usually good weather. So I don't know. I like these guys that don't have to play in, the frozen tundra.
Tank Dell's fully not back yet health-wise. You can still see it out there, but he's better. To Steven's point, like the beginning of the year, there was no burst to be afraid of, and that's his thing, is being bursty because he's so small. That was the fear. He's finally getting that back, and you can be rest assured that next year it'll be completely back.
Yeah, I think, and the big thing for me, just the Diggs. I don't think enough people realize that was essentially a 1-year deal that Diggs was signed to.
Yeah, Tank Dell, man. Go out and get him. I mean, what idiot would trade him right now, right, Steven? Steven and I just made a deal. I had to get a quarterback, okay? I had to ship off Tank Dell. Yeah. I knew what I gave up.
It was a good trade. Another buy, Dak Prescott. I think that's a good one.
Buy injury dips on quarterbacks because it never really comes back to get them unless it's a running quarterback and major leg injury. He's fine. Yeah. Dak is fine.
Yep.
All right. Enough of the receivers. Let's get to running backs. I know this is a good buy because when I texted it in the group chat of whom I'm buying, Jacob said, no, you're not. Yes, I am. Javonte Williams. You hear me out there? Javonte Williams. This season, he has been just fine. He's been good. He's been fantasy relevant. He's been
just fine is exactly what I want.
He's been the RB 26 on the season. How often does this happen that there is a running back who we knew is good at football? They had a couple bad years. They had a bad stretch. They weren't as efficient. They're terrible. These guys, they still have this guy. They should cut this guy. He is the RB 38 according to Keep Trade Cut. That's what the public thinks of him. They agree with Jacob. But this happens so often. A dude we know is good, was a great prospect. He's about to hit free agency at age 25. He was so young entering the league. At age 25, he's going to get a shot to go find a new team. And thank goodness. I'm not saying the Broncos are just this terrible team. I think they're actually exciting this year. But guys, they're 20th in points scored. This is not a high-flying offense. They're not a great run-blocking team. This hasn't been phenomenal. Oh, and here's an example, a bunch of examples of players who left their original team and went on to have success. And I'm not saying Javonte Williams will be an RB1. A lot of these guys weren't, but these are guys who went on, were this just, get rid of it, it's disgusting, and jumped back. The list is DeAndre Swift. With 2 different teams, he's been good. David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt twice now, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, James Conner, Josh Jacobs. None of those guys were like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry level. I ignored those guys. Those are outlandishly good prospects. Yes, they're going to be good anywhere. But those are dudes who are middle of the road, averaging very similar to him, 3.9 yards per carry this year. That is where David Montgomery was before he went to the Detroit Lions in an incredible ecosystem and is now incredible. So if you just get this guy in a good spot, I think he can be incredible. Oh, 3.9 yards per carry, that doesn't sound great. Here's running backs this year averaging either 0.2 or less ahead of him, so basically the same, or behind him. Kyron Williams, we like him? Yes. Kenneth Walker, is he good? Yup. DeAndre Swift, Najee, Christian McCaffrey, Ramondre Stevenson, all good fantasy running backs. But this one, because he's in Denver, no one wants him. Additionally, he's an incredible pass catcher and, very importantly, a great pass blocker. Someone's going to bring him in, pay him, and he's going to play a lot. He's 5th in targets and 10th in receiving yards among backs. This is just a good above-average player who's going to go somewhere that needs a running back. We're seeing a running back renaissance, and his value cannot go down. It can only go up. Not an RB1, but a great buy.
Nope.
Jacob,
good point.
Jacob.
I'm with you. I don't want him back on the Broncos. Estimate can have the Broncos. Javonte, go elsewhere.
He will never be a lead running back in the NFL.
I think that is so outlandish and not backed to say.
No,
he currently is one. What do you mean?
Hardly. He wasn't last week when they finally gave Audric the workload and he had 1 carry. This dude isn't even a top 4 running back or a running back 2. Yet he is, let me check here, 5th in targets among running backs. And you're not a top 24 running back?
His team stinks.
He can't run the ball. He's terrible at running the ball.
Does the team stink?
The
team doesn't stink.
The offense.
Bo Nix doesn't stink.
The
Javonte Williams can't run the ball.
After just scoring 30-something points. So they were lower before that.
He is 33rd in breakaway runs at 3. His explosive rating is 45th. He can't evade tackles anymore. His yards per touch is terrible. And he's seen the 65th most average defenders in the box. At 5.7 are the defenders in the box that he's seeing when he's running the ball. He can't run the ball.
Go back and listen to the names I just listed off. We said these same things about all of those guys at some point.
Yeah, I struggle with this one because I did think he looked so good as a rookie. I liked him when he was coming out. One concern I had with him is he was just a sub-athlete. He was a 4.62 40-yard dash athlete, which is just bottom percentile. And then he didn't have much burst. Well, no, he had decent burst. It was
great
okay.
Burst. That was his thing.
Solid burst.
It was okay. It wasn't great. His agility was actually decent. I just worry how much of that injury sapped his explosiveness. Now he last year obviously he was bad. This year he has gotten better. He's at 4 yards per carry on the season. I don't know. I'm kind of Andrew. I like it in the sense of I could see him being like a David Montgomery type running back moving forward.
That's a great running back.
So much better.
I think that I could see that though, Jacob. Like
he's not going to the
prospects.
Lions is the problem.
I
guess that's my question. If we're buying him, he's not going to be on Denver next year. That feels almost certain. So where is he going to go to where you feel good about his fantasy value?
I'd have to look up a list of teams. He just needs to be a starter somewhere in a good offense that doesn't have a running back.
I don't think he's going to be a starter.
And I didn't pull up a list, but hey, you mentioned high-end speed being a problem. That list of running backs I just mentioned, David Montgomery, 4.6, Kareem Hunt, 4.6, Tony Pollard, 4.5, James Conner, 4.6, Josh Jacobs, 4.6. Yeah. That's their 40s. That's what he's compared to.
My worry with him is he's seen top 5 target usage as a running back in Denver. I don't see anywhere he goes where he gets top 5 target usage, and then he has to run the ball more, and we're not seeing him run the ball well right now. And that's against no defenders in the box. So I just don't know where he goes.
Dynasty. RB38. There's only up to go.
Maybe. I don't know.
With an RB30 ceiling. I
just don't. I guess my thing is I don't see a ton of upside with him. Like you look at his efficiency stats, they're all pretty bad. I think that NFL teams do pay attention to that. I think he has to land on a really good offense.
Yeah.
For this to
He's
work.
going to be a hell of a handcuff. I tell you that.
Oh,
Yeah,
everybody remember this moment. He's going to be good. He's never going to be an RB1, but he's going to be solid for Dynasty. And as Steven says, we can't always just buy superstars.
No, I'm proud of you, Andrew. You bought a guy who, I mean, at one point was a very high touted rookie, but he has really fallen off. So I applaud you for looking to dive deep a little bit. I'm on the fence on this one a little bit, though. I do think by the end of the season, you might be able to get him cheaper, though. They do end with the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Chiefs to end the year, which are very tough matchups.
I don't know if Sean Payton's going to go back to Audric or if he's just going to keep going back and forth, but he might even get
he might
cheaper
he might
if
be
that happens.
cheaper.
Yeah, I'm not buying redraft. I am buying him in Dynasty. Go out and get you a Dynasty league. And thank you guys for tuning into our podcast. If you like Dynasty content, I argue we do the best Dynasty content anywhere. We're going to be running rookies. We're going to be running buy sells all offseason. We kicked butt this offseason in rookie rankings and all of that. You guys want to tune into that. Steven was just mentioning the Khalil Shakir as a big breakout star, and I mentioned Jackson Smith and Jigba as a great breakout star.
It was right on brand for both of us.
Same talented prospects, but thank you for tuning in. You're going to get more of that. Hit that like button, subscribe, and that Dynasty content will just fall into your laps. But of course, we'll also continue the redraft stuff until the season ends. Get a weekly season guide and eventually a rookie guide for less than the price of a large pizza. Honey, we don't need to eat out tonight. We're staying in. We're investing in my fantasy season. Follow our page on Instagram, X, TikTok, everywhere at Fantasy Guides. I'm Andrew Teuscher. That's Stephen Rippey. That's Jacob Rhodes. Say goodbye to the friends at home.
Bye,
Peace.
friends.